Dear audience, thank you so much for watching us today. I'm your host, Shoaib Ahmed, inviting you Democracy and Justice Show with Shoaib Ahmed, obviously. Dear audience, you know that ICE, the Immigration Enforcement Agency, has shot and killed an American citizen. I believe this is the first time they killed an American citizen in Minneapolis. We are inviting Aidan Rivera to our virtual studio to talk about the ICE incident and how we as a community can come together. Aidan Rivera, welcome to our virtual studio.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Hey, everyone.
Yeah. Aidan, I have a lot to discuss within our short time, obviously. But first, let me play a report from Al Jazeera on the incident, and then we'll talk about it.
Yes.
That's fine, dude. I'm not mad at you.
New video appearing to show Renee Nicole Good moments before being fatally shot by an ICE agent in Minneapolis. The images adding fuel to a raging and starkly partisan debate over whether or not the shooting was justified. The Trump administration says the ICE agent who shot Renee Good acted in self-defense and has labeled the 37-year-old Minneapolis resident a domestic terrorist.
I can believe that her death is a tragedy while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making and a tragedy of the far left who has marshaled an entire movement, a lunatic fringe against our law enforcement officers.
At City Hall, state and local officials accusing the administration of hiding the facts.
We demand for there to be an honest and a thorough investigation and for the state to be a part of that because we do not want the federal government covering up this murder.
And at the scene of Tuesday's shooting, a makeshift memorial, now also a focal point for demonstrations against the presence of ICE agents in the city.
It's very clear that they've come to the conclusion that the killing of Renee Good was justified. So I think they've already made up their mind and don't really want a genuine investigation. I'm not hopeful that anyone's actually going to bring about justice.
We've been speaking to residents of this community only a few steps away from where that shooting took place here in the city of Minneapolis on Wednesday. Many people here telling us that that characterization by the Trump administration of Renee Nicole Good as a domestic terrorist is simply not true.
With an investigation now in federal hands, a larger national reckoning is taking place not only over immigration enforcement and the use of force, but over truth itself. Manuel Rapalo, Al Jazeera, Minneapolis.
Crazy.
All right. Aidan, the report, it stated that the vice president mentioned Renee Good, who obviously was killed in this incident, as a domestic terrorist. Is his statement justified? How do you see? We have been seeing that President Trump mentioned right after the incident that it is hard to believe that the ICE agent is alive after ran over. The video did not prove that. The video did not suggest the ICE agent was ran over. How do you describe the whole situation, the role of this great woman, and how she is being framed by the agents and by the administration itself?
Yeah, I think it's perfect that you use the word framed because that could be used in more than one way. The situation has been framed and, stated in one way, but she's also been framed legally. She's been labeled a domestic terrorist, a crazy leftist, maybe a paid agitator, all of these things that just were untrue, untruths about the entire situation. I hate to be completely gross, but it's not a metaphor. It's true. Literally before the body was cold, you had Kristi Noem lying about the details of the scenario. You had J.D. Vance. You had President Trump posting on social media lies. And he posted that very full-throated defense of the ICE and, slanderous libel remarks about this woman without seeing the video himself. It's come out now that his original first statement was before he even saw the footage himself. It's just terrible.
Right, right. If I can ask you that, we know that this very incident actually happened because about 2,000 ICE agents showed up in a community in Minneapolis, not that far from the George Floyd incident, in the same place, which one was erupting protest around the country. It's very close, physically close to that place. Why 2,000 agent needs to show up in a community?
That's a very good question. And the answer that you would get from law enforcement and from the government is, their answer would be one thing. I think the truth of the matter is, they like optics, they like performance in theater and putting on a show. They like shows of force. We saw this when ICE came in with helicopters, like it was some complicated military mission, and basically attacked an apartment building, and in the middle of the night took women and children and put them in in vehicles, many of them for no good reason. They like the theatrics, they like a show, whether it's for the public, that way there's a chilling effect and people do less, come out less, and maybe don't speak out or do something, and also so that they can show their boss, President Trump, look, we're doing what you want. Don't you like when we come out with hundreds of agents and we do this? So that's what I think.
Yeah, yeah. One rationale from the police and whoever is supporting, it's hard to believe somebody is supporting this kind of incident, but there are people in the country who probably are supporting. Anyway, they would say that the ICE agent feared for his life. She was trying to run him over, and even in the we are live, and one of our viewers is saying that don't interfere with the law enforcement. So I'm sure some people will think that it is justified. I know that you studied criminal justice, you work in the field. Why would you say the killing of the ICE agent is not a self-defense?
Wow. I mean, it's. I would start off very simply with people, and it's to the point because I don't want to debate but debating with people who are acting in bad faith and just why they're saying what they're saying, and it's not because they actually, that's their perspective. To put it very simply, this woman's intent was not to kill or probably even harm the gentleman who killed her, and he killed her. He murdered her. That's to put it simply. But to put it more complicated and to break it down, there's an escalation of use of force. There's all of these things that we can go through, and I feel like I have to shake these people up who are arguing against their own best interests and tell them, you have rights. And just because even when you interfere, which might be a crime, you don't deserve to be killed. Even if you interfere, maybe you can be arrested, maybe you could be fined. You don't deserve to be killed. And that's not saying that I advocate for people interfering. But even when and someone said this recently to me, even when you steel man these people's arguments, which is the opposite of straw manning, even when I bolster your argument and make it stronger, there's no defensible explanation or justification. This gentleman, on top of murdering her, him and the other agents, he left the scene immediately after doing it, which you couldn't even do if you got into a car accident. That's a crime.
Right.
They refused medical attention. When EMS arrived, she had to be carried to the vehicle for EMS to be treated. Just at every line, at every step, and this is what they would look at in criminal cases, is at every decision-making basically step, did you make the right step or did you consciously make the wrong step? And I think that what he did was conscious and, on purpose.
Right. You mentioned about the paramedics coming and taking her to their car. There is a video. I don't have the video right now, but I'm sure you watched it and millions of other people watched this. There is a video that a physician, a doctor on the spot, identifying himself and asking the ICE agent whether he can see her soon. ICE agent denied that. How cruel that can be, in your opinion?
Unbelievably cruel. It's also very upsetting and triggering for people. It's a traumatic situation where you see someone get shot, you see a vehicle crash, you want to rush to go help, and you're being stopped. And you said before this was very close by where George Floyd was murdered,
Mhm.
and that was another situation that could have been prevented. Obviously, it's unbelievably cruel. You mentioned that video. In that same video, not only is that person stopped and they just say, hey, please stay back. One agent is heard saying, I don't care.
Mhm. Right.
That was his response. And the same cruelty continues after the fact because you have people showing up for the vigil and for remembrance and to be there. And you have the vigil being destroyed or, basically desecrated. You have the people being brutalized. So it's just a, it, it multiplies.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. 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 Now let's talk about ICE. Some people will say that you should be grateful that ICE is out there. They are protecting you from these vicious criminals that's crossing our border, coming here, and doing X, Y, and Z. In your own understanding, why or why not we need ICE? Like, should we be grateful to ICE that is keeping us safe from the crime? If not, why not?
Sure. Okay. Well, in my personal opinion, we don't need ICE. ICE could be disbanded. ICE is it's a post 9/11, post September 11th creation by the United States federal government.
Mhm.
We existed for a couple hundred years before they existed just fine. We still have CBP, Customs and Border Protections. We still have the FBI. We still have the CIA. We still have local, state, federal police. Um, and as they operate right now, they're not, targeting the worst of the worst or criminals.
Right.
Under President Obama, there were plenty of people who were deported. And if someone commits crimes, and if the federal government deems that it's necessary, cool, great. But that's not their main focus, and we know that's
Mhm.
not. We hear officials in the administration, the Trump administration, saying, "Hey, explicitly, why aren't you going after people at 7-Elevens and Home Depots?"
Right.
Which means, average people who just seem maybe a certain ethnicity.
Right.
We have
Like
them.
if they're going after the criminals, why would they show up people's workplaces? So these are the
Exactly.
workplaces that people are working. They are working, earning money, feeding the family, paying the tax. Why you show up there? Why not you show up in their very crime scene and in their
I
very
have another question for you, which is a good one. Similar to workplaces, if they're going after criminals, why are they going after people who are showing up for their scheduled court dates like
right,
they're supposed
right,
to?
right.
So it's all just a farce and it's all just lies to, make it sound better. But just like, we can watch that video that if you're okay watching something like that from Minneapolis, we could watch that with our own eyes. We have our own eyes and we know that they're lying and that it's untrue. And again, it's just for optics trying to frame it one way when in reality it's just cruelty. It's just,
Right.
Trying to scare people.
Right, right. We also know, Aiden, that most ICE agent nowadays they don't show their faces. They're hiding their faces in mask. Why is that? From criminal justice perspective, how? First of all, two questions. Is it even legal for them not to identify themselves, not to give their badge number, even covering their faces? Like, how would I know as an average American that this is not somebody who is trying to abduct me versus this is a legitimate law enforcement? How would I know that?
I'm very glad that you said that because within the past year, when they really started stepping it up and taking more actions, that was my first concern. Was not that a tragic incident like this one this week would happen, but who's to say that these masked men running up to me in my vehicle, I don't know that you're law enforcement when you don't identify yourself, when you don't look like it. Um, is it legal? I think there's still a gray area. I think that's still up to debate. From a policing perspective, we can go as far back as when police first started using vehicles more, and instead of the classic beat cop, and you just had that separation of you don't see your local policeman as a policeman anymore. You see them as an object of oppression, really. And similarly, you can continue it into the militarization of police and the fact that they're overly armed, overly equipped, and what goes hand in hand with that is then bad things coming from it. And yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah. I also want to get your take on the media, the right-wing media, the traditional right-wing media, how they're vilifying the victim itself without any shame. You hear Fox News, the anchors, they're continuously discrediting Renee Good's credentials, saying that she's a poet, she's a writer, she's probably a lesbian, why she is even there. Like, does any of this identity prevent us as American to protest, to show up, to help our community and neighbor?
No, I mean, they're just trying to connect the bigotry dots, let's say, so that they can paint a picture of the perfect, I was going to say victim because she was a victim, but the perfect perpetrator. They said, like, the things that you included. She had her pronouns in her bio. Cool, great. That doesn't have any bearing on the incident that occurred and her being murdered. It was the same thing as pick any case that usually involves a minority. They did this with George Floyd. They did this with on Staten Island, where I live. They did that with Eric Garner. It's the character assassination after someone's dead and they can't defend themselves, and they could say, 10 years ago you committed a crime, so you're not an angel. And to go further into this, now you have people like in the media saying, "Oh, is this the left wing's new hero?" Someone doesn't have to be perfect, and they're not my hero when I defend them and their rights and say that they shouldn't be murdered for no reason from federal police. And another thing too, to continue with the media, is within the past year, you had a lot of media from the press pool at the White House who left. And they left because there was essentially a loyalty oath that they were given, and they were given two choices, say yes or leave. And, the details of that agreement really, and what the people who have stayed have agreed to, have come out. And that's why now you have the people who have stayed are the worst of the worst. They're sycophants. They toe the line. They agree to everything, and they're not real journalists. They're not.
Yeah. Aiden, I want to know, because you're the president of Staten Island Young Democrats, right? And you show up in a lot of these protests against whatever injustice you feel like you care about. Now, a lot of right-wing media and President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance is describing the protesters who are showing up, these ICE raids and whatnot, as a professional agitator. Like, do you consider yourself as a professional agitator? What goes in your mind when you show up for a protest? What do you care about? Why you are there in the protest? Can you tell us
Well, let
your
me
personal experience?
say, if I could make a joke, I wish I was a professional protester. I wish I got paid full time to to protest injustices, because there's no shortage. But when I hear that, it's very upsetting. My immediate response is to say, I don't have to get a dime to speak up about something that I care about. And when people say stuff like that, or one reason why they say it is it goes into this, conspiratorial big enemy that they have to fight against. These people are funded by George Soros or some big Democrats. And no, I mean, we might organize, but there's nothing wrong about that. That's a good thing, actually. So when I show up for a protest, or direct action, it's not to break any laws. It's to exercise my constitutional rights. Everything is legal. A lot of times, a lot of the protests that I organize or I'm part of are already coordinated with local police, which a lot of people don't love because they may say you can only stay on this certain sidewalk or this area. They might restrict your megaphone usage, for sound or something like that. But everything is legal, and it's mostly for appearance to, let a local elected official know that they have hundreds of constituents that are upset. Maybe you can get some media coverage, and then people are interviewed, and then it makes the paper. And it's all about trying to influence the decision makers, the people who have the power that you're trying to appeal to. Yeah.
Right. Aidan, we know that after the incident, the governor of the state, he prepared his National Guard to battle the ice or to keep the ice of the street or whatever. He signaled that he will preparing the National Guard for it. Do you fear any civil unrest, civil war, if ICE agents are showing up every state like this and more American citizens are getting killed? Do you feel like there is a chances of getting us into a bigger scenario from here in terms of civil riots and civil wars?
Yeah, I think that's a really real concern, and I think that's completely possible. Whether it's between different forms of law enforcement, because when people have been organizing things like Know Your Rights trainings and stuff like that, they talk about the issue of non-local law enforcement, which basically means federal law enforcement or ICE. But who's to say that? And I believe the mayor of Minneapolis has said this, because he was asked, have you considered using your local police to arrest ICE agents? And he said himself, basically, I would probably be well within my rights, but my concern is basically an all-out war then, when which is scary, but that's a practical thing that you have to think about when you have people who have different different powers, when you have people who are conflicting and giving different orders. But I also think that, local municipalities should have a right to say, we do not want you here. You should leave, which is good when the mayor said, get the fuck out of my community. And I like that a lot.
Yeah. I was listening to some commentary after the incident, and one of the suggestions, I don't know, I will run it by you. You tell me. One of the suggestion was that the state, the governor, so the state or the local authority can take away the driving privileges, the driving licenses, can suspend the driving licenses of the ICE agent or ICE vehicles. So ICE vehicles cannot drive in the state. That will be illegal for them in order to prevent them coming into the community and terrorizing them. Is that legally possible? Do you see that as a solution, extreme solution to these situations?
That's interesting. I think that might be possible, actually, legally. And it's interesting because then you run into people who, like I just said, the mayor may not want to send his police to arrest them, but they might technically find a way to make their life more complicated. I would love to see that, but you're also finding people who, oftentimes you'll have local police who don't even live in the communities that they police, but now you're finding these ICE agents who they might not even be from the same state. So, who's to say they're coming from another state with their driver's license and then they come into your state and the whole thing is complicated.
Right. If we focus on New York City, we know that there are a lot of ICE raids in New York City as well. Sometimes ICE agents don't tell their ICE their written police in their vest and whatnot. If ICE shows up in a neighborhood, let's say ICE shows up in Staten Island, in your neighborhood, and there are immigrant communities. Do you have any suggestion how to handle those situations, what to do, what not to do?
Yeah. So this is a really good question because they recently have, it's been very targeted and few and far between, but they have been here. And when they were, friends of mine actually went to basically be ice watch, and you could be in the area with noisemakers and let people know that they're in the area. You have a right to record them and tell people that they are there. One thing that's important part of the training, though, is to be sure and to be certain that it is ice. That way, you don't just scare people for no good reason. And yeah, you have every legal right to indirectly interfere. You could record them. You could berate them in a non-threatening way and speak your mind. Um, some people have flattened their car tires, which I'm not gonna, you know, comment on. But there's different ways that people are expressing themselves, and I would say organize within your community. This is why community is so important, and we have this happening in each borough of New York. Really, is these ice watch groups where people who have time take their time to keep an eye on certain neighborhoods that they think might be being targeted by ICE, and go defend their neighbors.
Yeah. Okay. Now we are almost at the end of our show, but let me ask you this anyway. This is a Republican administration, but you mentioned in your previous responses that you don't see ICE is actually necessary because we have so many layers of law enforcement that can keep the criminals out of the street and whatnot. During the Democratic administration, let's say Joe Biden, President Obama, we didn't see they took any action to, at least in the path of abolishing IS or replacing it with a better agency or anything like that. You are a Democrat. What do you see Democrats can do going forward, or are Democrats and Republicans the same when it comes to when they're in power, they really don't take any positive action, and when they're not in the power, they just protest and talk about it for political purposes?
And that's a really good question. I would say a lot of people operate that way because it's very easy to just argue about the current thing. And I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but I would say that a lot of establishment, status quo, old guard Democrats, which is why I like being a young Democrat, is to go along to get along, not to rock the boat too much. So they might not, dissolve ICE. They might not utilize them as much when they come into power. And you see that a lot with throughout history, American history, with rights and things like that. They might not necessarily completely abolish something, but they'll always keep it there as a threat and an option. I think that in this election season, the midterms are coming up, and Trump has record disapproval, and Republicans in general have a lot of record disapproval ratings. I believe that any Democrat, the ask of their constituents should be one of their platforms, defund, dissolve, get rid of ICE. I think that should be the starting point, and you should go from there, because when you start asking for a little bit, you're never going to get a lot. But maybe if you ask for a lot and work from there, you'll get it. I also think that it's totally okay for us to have certain red lines, and the people have spoken. I think the vast majority of Americans don't agree with what ICE is doing. So it would be nice to see electeds, agree with the people.
Right, right. Let me ask you this: that President Trump, as we have been speaking, that if this ICE brutality keep going on and more American citizens keep getting killed, harassed, tortured by ICE, and the governors and local administration are compelled to do something about it, there is a legitimate fear of civil unrest, civil war in America. if we look at the outside of this country, in the world view, this administration, President Trump, is creating a huge chaos there as well. They're just abducted, captured in their language, the head of another state in Venezuela. And President Trump is saying that we're going to run Venezuela. He is not capable of running his own country. He was not capable of running his own casino. What rights he has to run another country? And like US, is he creating? How unhinged is this administration in your view? Are we about in a way of a third world war or a bigger conflict outside of America because of the irresponsible behavior of this administration?
Well, I would say to your question, he has no right to do much of what he's doing. I looked into just today actually the legal justification behind the actions in Venezuela. Um, Man, it's scary. I would say my concern right now is not, a global nuclear war or World War III, but maybe a war over resources. Some sort of geographical, allies being formed, whether it's with Iran. You saw him speaking about Greenland, and he says that we need it for national security, which is ridiculous. Before he took the action against President Maduro, he has said explicitly that we should just take their oil. So there's really no
but one thing
confusion
I will
here.
give credit to him that he doesn't hide. He tells that he's
Oh
going to
yeah,
rob somebody else's oil and resources. He says it in camera.
yeah.
He's
I
not
would
being
say he's just a
diplomatic and
quiet part
saying that
loud.
he's going to bring democracy and good governance. He's just saying, no, we are there for oil.
Yeah, yeah. And anything else is a bonus. I will give him one thing. Yeah, he's. I don't think he has the ability to lie.
Probably
But
he doesn't care either. Probably he doesn't
yeah,
care either.
yeah. But yeah, no. Legally, it's just very scary. You have historic allies, speaking out about the actions against us basically invading Venezuela. We have him trying to say that technically it's not a declaration of war. The military was just used so that the FBI and law enforcement can capture this guy for his his indictments and his crimes. And then again, you have the battle of the framing and the optics, and people saying, "Oh, why are you saying that that was a bad thing? What do you like Maduro?" I don't have to like Maduro to think that
Mm,
my country should not invade another one and steal their resources. It's just
right.
obfuscation from the real issue.
Yeah, right. We are going to conclude our show now, but let me ask you the last question, coming back to Renee Good. Are you hopeful that she will get some sort of justice? The ICE agent that killed an American citizen in camera in border daylight without any apparent life threat. Do you think that Americans, like organizers like you and across the country, should organize more protest and more pressure so that this government cannot just get away with the murder of an American citizen?
Yes. Yes, I think people should. I think it should start with the most local, people in that community, people in Minneapolis, and then people in that state. Um, but it is also an American issue because it's not just an isolated incident. We've seen these agents pointing weapons, pointing guns
Mhm.
at people. So at any time over the past, year or so, this situation could have played out. It just so happens that now it did there. Um, I'm somewhat hopeful that something is done, but we have seen cases in the past where law enforcement gets off and people, justice isn't done, and then we see what happens after that when communities are upset because justice wasn't brought about. Um, I would love to see it. I think it may happen. I'm a little worried also because I believe the FBI took over immediately because of the gravity of the situation. I'm a little hopeful, but I think that if average people apply pressure, maybe something will actually be done.
Yeah. With that hope, thank you so much, Aiden Rivera, for your kind time to our show today.
Yeah, thank you.